everyone. My name is Dr. Hal Bradley. I would like to ask us, each and every one of you, that if you enjoyed these shows, please hit like, share, and subscribe after you view the show. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, world, and welcome to another episode of the Crisis Victory Show. Today, I have a friend of mine on air who also has a podcast show known as mobtruecrime.com. JC, or Jeff to me. I'd like to introduce him at this time. And what we're going to do today, folks, is we're going to have a discussion about a very dear friend of both of ours who was recently diagnosed with terminal illness. And we know that this topic and the subject would reach every single family in America. We all know that death is going to come. We all know that we're going to lose people close to us through the dying process. In my 26 years of being a hospice counselor and becoming a certified hospice chaplain in 2018, I myself have taken over 60 people through the actual dying process. So I understand that even after they pass, we still have to deal with those that are grieving that have not passed. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the audience to Jeff. Jeff, good morning, brother. Good to see you, man.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be on, and I appreciate the invite. We'll have some fun here. And
yeah, we will. I'd like to start out that some of the commonalities you and I have. We have a history of Mendocino County at the time of the Mexican marijuana conversion to the high-grade bud that came up out of that area. That's pretty fascinating to me because my history with that goes back to the late 70s when the Emerald Triangle was in its full formation at that time. And you were there in the early 90s, I believe, your partner?
Yeah. I started up in the whole cannabis stuff in 1992. I was just 17 years old when I kind of went from, the first time you smoke to selling rather quick because I just saw my friends like to smoke too. And it evolved rather fast. Yeah, we had local cartel guys in the middle of California. A lot of people outside of California don't know that the cartels have been here for a long time, but the power as they know it now is much, much, much higher than it was in our old days. They needed us years ago. They needed Americans to help them move it. Now with the proliferation of Mexican communities all over America, they don't need us as much as they used to. But in your day, 70s and 80s in particular, it was vital they were connected with guys like you in particular.
Yeah, Jeff, when I was young in 1969, the age of 15, 16, I was living in a mining camp down on the Durango-Zacatecas border. And during that time of living down there, no mom, no dad, nobody in my family. I was sent there, got kicked out of school, and they thought the experience would be very enlightening for me to learn about another culture. But they didn't know that I was going into a business that was in fact a front for a high-level narcotics operation. I mean, I used to ride my burro along the poppy fields when I was 15 years old, when my friends up in Seattle, Washington were riding Swen bicycles with banana seeds and ape hanger handlebars. I mean, I remember meeting Ramon Arellano Felix when he was 7 years old. He would come up with his uncle and visit the man who was responsible for my safety, my own bodyguard. And by the way, the only person that even spoke English. I was living in a village of about 200 people. But as time progressed, I became friends with a kid down there of my age whose family was, this is before the cartels. This is in 1969, 70. This was still criminal organizations that ran their own territories. But after military service, I went back down in the fall of 74, early 75, reconnected with my village and started smuggling marijuana out of there. And later became involved in Jalisco, where I met Chapo Guzman and Ramon Arellano Felix. I met again, and I met, the guy that invented Sinsemilla. I cannot believe I'm drawing a blank right now because I knew him pretty well. But he was also the one that was responsible for the execution of Special Agent Kiki Camarena in the mid-1980s. And yeah, it was an amazing time in our history. But the marijuana industry at that time was right at the point of the conversion of creating Sinsemilla from that Mexican barely no high type marijuana that all of us from the 70s remember really well. And I was living in Northern California in the town of Ukiah at that time, and that was in Mendocino County. So I became involved with growers up there that were putting out that new indica sativa strains of marijuana that was absolutely, without a doubt, some of the best in the world. And you also have a little bit of knowledge in working with that. As you said earlier, you had an associate that was up in Mendocino at that time. So you understand the transition of going from the Mexican marijuana, where ultimately the cartels were moving people into the United States and actually doing their own grows right up in the same neighborhoods that my friends were growing in.
Yeah. My co-host M. Callie, he just finished a book actually called Catch 420, where he explains the culmination of a bust that happened in 2005, in which it was a multi-state operation from FBI down to locals and numerous county sheriffs and whatnot. And I was investigated in that operation too. And the main target of it was a Mexican guy who was well connected south and north. And I met with that guy 3 months ago. He got out of prison a couple of years ago.
Oh.
We're still friends now. And he's a cool guy. He's a businessman like I am now, regular law-abiding business, above board.
Yes.
And very
Yes.
much a Christian too. A lot of us went that direction. But the truth is that, these the compressed brick weed, and we had different names for it, was coming up. And, I didn't get started till the early 90s, of course, because I was born in 75. So, you got to grow up to a certain extent before you get going. But the transition, in the old days, we would get the high grade stuff from Grateful Dead kind of, hippies that grew up
Yeah.
there. They would, everywhere where Jerry Garcia was, you could find a lot of psychedelics and cannabis, etc. And they would, it would come down here. And then we also grew in the Sierras, the eastern part of Fresno and Kern, and all the counties that, the Sierras is an okay place to grow to. And of course they had the good old helicopters going around there and looking for everybody and hunting everybody down. And that kind of, I think, is why the cartels ultimately did take control of it, was because the Americans get busted. We go to prison. A lot of times back then, Mexican nationals get busted and they can cut plea deals to where they agree to be deported and they get out of jail.
Yeah, exactly.
There's an advantage for them.
I was going to bring up a point to that. You're exactly correct. That is the advantage. But, I spent 15 years of my life around the Sinaloa drug cartel. I'm very, very familiar with their activities stateside and down here. As you know, I'm an author of 12 books. I've written an entire series called Codename the Fox. I was recruited out of Leavenworth Federal Prison by the Department of Justice, brought back by a judge, and ended up spending 17 years as a contractor in undercover capacity, working in many different countries. I've been kidnapped. I've been captured. I've survived multiple death orders, including a kill order here at my own house up here in Washington State, where I was hit and left for dead. It's, as you and I both well know, it's an extremely hostile and violent world that you and I survived and went through in the years that we were involved. It's just a miracle that we're here to be able to talk about it as Christians, truly locked in the faith. I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ in October of 1993. It was the 19th at 3:30 in the afternoon. I was in a cell waiting to head to federal prison for 8 years, and dropped on my knees and just said, I can't take any more of this. I just can't do it. And a prisoner came into the cell, dropped on his knees beside me, put a hand on my shoulder and started praying. Seconds later, Jeff, another inmate came in on the other side of me and did it. And in that moment, the bonds broke from me. And I was totally saturated in wanting to learn about Jesus Christ and have an understanding of why I was feeling so amazingly wonderful and beautiful and full of love. And anger had left me and hatred had left me, and all of the negativity of my life vanished in an instant, kind of like what happened to Saul on the road to Damascus, where he was struck down and became the Apostle Paul in the house of Ananias, an enemy. Former. It's just amazing. Well, it's happened to you. It's happened to me. And today, the topic of our conversation is about a mutual brother of ours, Gunnar. And it happened to Gunnar. So look at that, how God can take and transform evil and evil action into goodness, showing his purity, his love, his faith, and his ability to conform and transform people like you and me to where we are now dutiful servants to Jesus Christ till the last breath we take and join him eternally. Well, Gunnar is,
Absolutely. For a lot of
yeah,
people who don't understand, they see movies about drug running and stuff, and that's just a 2 hour thing. They get intrigued. When you're actually involved with it, there's a
yeah,
tremendous amount of stress. With me, I was constantly worried about who was this guy or that guy.
yeah,
It really messes with your psychology and your mind. And so, like with me, the one of the for people can be hardened and they can be strong, smart, both kind of, and they make it through. And you start to understand that some of the reason why you didn't get put down, let's say, or other things, was because of maybe your luck and intelligence, but ultimately
yeah.
you start to chalk it up to something bigger. Like, just to give you an example, when one of the reasons why I made it through, and I've had former FBI agents tell me this, as well as high level Russian kind of hacker guys, was in the 90s, I knew how to take our old cordless phones that we used to use at houses, and I used to know how to make a portable one using CB antennas that had magnet mounts for the magnet mounts that go on cars or diesel trucks. And I knew how to hack into regular people's phones using a handset, so that each
Wow.
time I dialed out a drug call, I could be dialing it out from some regular civilian's phone number who had no idea that I was on their phone. So the FBI is like, well, talking to former agents, they're like, well, the only way we could have actually wiretapped your most important calls is if we had a crew following you around at that exact moment within range of a base station antenna inside someone's home. And we have the right frequency for that phone model. And we have to hit at the precise moment that you are talking. And they're like, well, now
Amazing.
I've had them say, so yeah, I used to think, bro, that it was because I was a high IQ, extremely smart guy why I got through.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I was humbled to realize that some of that, but ultimately it was God. God was looking out. My mother was praying for me. She knew I was obviously doing negative things. Family members prayed. Those prayers are why I left as relatively unscathed. And I use the phrase relatively because even if you don't go to prison for a long time, that whole life screws with your head.
Oh,
It
yeah,
really,
forever. It stays with us, Jeff. I spent 15 years at the Sinaloa drug cartel, and in the last 7 to 8 years of my life, I was moving a quarter to a third of a ton of cocaine a month in the Pacific Northwest corridor. I established the trade routes, transportation routes, safe houses directly out of Culiacan, Sinaloa, Mexico, dealing with guys that I had known since I was a child. And now they were all becoming famous drug lords. Last time I saw Chapo was at a wedding in Culiacan, where I was down there with my wife, sitting at the table of bosses, and she was sitting over there with the wives and mistresses. And Los Tigres de la Norte, a real famous Mexican band, was playing at this wedding that night. And the couple, they were powerful, famous, rich people out of Culiacan. I'm not going to say their names, but nonetheless, you get the picture. And all of a sudden, these guys come in with AK-47 rifles. The band stops instantly. And a few moments later, Chapo Guzman was escorted in. He walks up to the table of the bride and groom and their family, presents a gift to them in his respects. And then he came over to the table of bosses. And I remember real well, one of the guys sitting next to me says, "Oh, okay, Hefe." He said, "This is our good friend from the Pacific Northwest in America." And Chapo looks at me and he gets a gleam in his eye and he goes, "Oh, I remember you." And we had known each other down in I met Rafael Caro Quintero. That's the name I was trying to remember. I was moving weed for him out of Jalisco at the time. And that's when I met Chapo. And Chapo was only involved in the marijuana business. He was just up and coming himself. He wasn't a boss. So here I am looking at this guy that I knew 20 some odd years ago. And I have a photograph of me and Chapo when I was 28 and he was 26. And wow. It's really, yeah, it's just amazing. And here he is now, this major drug lord, probably the biggest drug dealer in the planet. And he comes in, but it was so funny when he came over and gave me a hug and showed me the respect in front of these bosses that they were all just totally blown away, because I never told anybody I knew Chapo. That's not something you do in that world. But the point I'm getting to is this: you and me and Gunnar, who we're going to be talking about today, came up in an environment of severe violence, very dangerous. And you didn't have to worry about just law enforcement. I mean, I'm moving $14-15 million worth of cocaine at a time up here in the Northwest in those days. So you also have to worry about the competition wanting to get you out of the picture so they can take over your territories. You have to worry about so many things, and you're at such a level that when you go down, if you go down, everyone's going to roll over on you and make their own deal. So you have that factor into play. So audience, like Jeff was talking about, there's a whole different thing that comes with living in that life that's not put on a motion picture screen.
Kids, don't try this at home.
Absolutely right, brother. But you know what? I think it makes us more powerful warriors in Christ as a result of surviving what we all went through.
True. I have very little fear. Evil people, quite frankly, don't scare me. So-called evil people today, because some of the guys we would have been around a lot more dangerous than, again, it's just, and when you show you're fearless as a Christian, that whole aura, that it makes an impression in and of itself.
The last time when I got hit up here in the night of June 16th, 7th, 2020, when the last knife strike into my head, I knew that I was dying and I'd be gone within seconds. And as I was fading out, I felt him release from me because he knew he had killed me. And I had this beautiful warmth and love and glow that surrounded and encompassed me. And like in Revelations, it talks about how the former things pass away. And that is true. In your moment of death, in that moment of finality, there is an acceptance to that. Everything here no longer carried any weight or meaning or purpose to me whatsoever. I was ready to go. And miraculously, whatever amount of time I was unconscious, I came out of it, and I was able to crawl to the back door of one of my tenants. I have a 5-plex up here, and knocked on the bottom of the door. They came out, and the rest is history. I was put in a hospital. I was in a coma for a day and a half, and when I came out of it, brother, the first thing I did was not only forgive the man that was sent to kill me, but with an understanding and a passion in my heart that I was nothing more than a name and an address on a piece of paper, just like I've done myself years earlier. So I did it.
There's a real peace, by the way, for people when you can forgive those that transgressed you. The very first time I was in the courts was as a 16-year-old for a relatively minor situation, and an individual snitched me out. So I figured out very quickly what it was like to have someone snitch on you. And I don't even I have no issue with anybody who's informed at this point. I could care less. The guy that did it, he ultimately got handled on the streets of California, but not by me, it was somebody else. But I forgave him. I've forgiven in Operation Greenspeaker, the one I alluded to with M. Cali. There's an individual who's in my city to this day who worked with the FBI and the DEA. I bear no ill will towards him at all. If he wanted to go into a church, he's actually an atheist, ironically enough. But if he wanted to go into a church, I would gladly say, hey, come on in. I bear no ill will towards anybody who's ever been involved with any of that kind of stuff, because I recognize that if you cannot forgive those who transgressed you, then you will never be forgiven. And at the same time, there's an inner peace that comes with knowing that you put that stuff to bed mentally, emotionally, and with your heart.
Brother, I couldn't have said it better. And, I think back to Paul's second epistle to the Corinthians, where he says, therefore, if you become in Christ, you're the new creation. Old things pass away. Behold, all things become new. Tell me, isn't that so true? The moment of our conversion and how we look back upon the evil and the life that we were involved with and associated with. And we don't carry no interest or no design to ever be of that again. And that, brother, is the true evidence, if you will, of the conversion into Christianity. To love all people.
I used to think that anybody believed in a higher power was absolutely nuts. That, you believe in an invisible man in the sky, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And but once you go through so much just all this flack, and then you make it through, you do realize that it wasn't just you. Okay. It wasn't just, I'm extremely intelligent, or I'm really brawny and I could whoop any. Ultimately, your victories and they were, alleged victories, really, if you look at the criminal world. But if your victories, quote unquote, only came to you because the Lord had a bigger plan for your life ultimately.
Well, and too, Jeff, a certain hunger comes upon you to learn more at the moment of your conversion. With me, I was heading into federal prison on an 8-year bit.
That's an incentive.
And I remember while I was in there, I plugged into Assemblies of God studies immediately. 2.5 years later, I was formally ordained. In April of 2004, some years after my release, I received my doctorate in pastoral counseling. And then in 2018, got my chaplaincy in hospice caregiving, which I've been doing for 26 years. While I was in federal prison, that was my job at Springfield, where I was dying of a terminal disease, and ended up shipped out of the FCI that I was at over to Springfield. Volunteered for an experimental drug, and 30 years later, here I am. But what was
back in the day, I was at an AA meeting. In one of the last time I was in the courts, that was one of my stipulations. I heard it best from a guy in AA who had been sober 30, 40 years. He gave a speech at a speakers meeting and said, I was literally on the ground, alcoholic, addicted to opiates, big bad stuff, right? And I prayed to God to send me angels. Well, the angels he sent me were wearing uniforms and had handcuffs. And ultimately, though, that's what saved you. Sometimes the Lord doesn't send you these nice, beautiful angels down to do the work for you. Sometimes it could be a positive thing for you. You can take all these situations if you're in the criminal underworld now, or you're addicted or whatever, listen to what we're saying. You can take that stuff. Those arrests can be used. That could be what saves you.
It did me. No, that's a great testimony you just gave, brother. It was in a holding cell en route to federal prison on an 8-year bump that I dropped to my knees and I received Jesus Christ. And I was dead serious about it. I knew that I was at a point in life where I couldn't handle it anymore. Hell, I had a contract on my life going into federal prison. I was facing years. My wife served me divorce papers the day before. My empire that I had built, worth millions, all gone, all disassembled and destroyed. On and on and on. We all go through that. But I found
like
something.
The story of Job, for those.
Exactly.
The book of Job's. He had all this stuff, and Satan tells God, if you take all this stuff away, he'll never serve you, kind of thing. And God said, all right, challenge accepted, right? And Satan is allowed to take his health, his children, his homes, etc. Everything goes up, right?
His herds, everything.
And then a woman goes up to Job as he's literally got boils on his skin and says, curse God and die. And he refuses to do it. And then at that point, Yahweh steps in and says, all right, Satan, you had your chance. Now he's getting back a lot more than what he was taken from him.
Brother, that's beautiful. And that's so true. And we know this as evidenced in our own lives. And we try to share this. This will be my 21st year working with the homeless, the destitute, working in trap houses. I've been a pastor of my own church. My bishop up there installed me for 3 years, but I was jumping off on missions for the Department of Justice at the same time I was pastoring a church. And it became so important to me to pay back, to not only say I'm sorry, but by example, show how sorry I was for the tons and tons of cocaine that I dumped into the Pacific Northwest corridor during my earlier years. And I spent 17 years undercover, as I was telling you earlier, brother. And when the time came for me to get out, I can remember for weeks getting messages from federal agents, military personnel, people I'd worked with over all of those years saying, brother, you did it. You paid it back. Enjoy your life. Go forward. Well, like I just said, this is my 21st year working in trap houses, and my home is right downtown where I'm at. I'm in an area where there are a lot of homeless community people. They all know me. They've known me for decades. They love me. They trust me. So I have like rape victims that are brought here in the middle of the night and dropped off on my steps with the doorbell ringing. I have people that are overdosing on heroin or fentanyl, and the Veterans Administration provides me with my Narcan kits. So people are brought here, and the reason they bring them here instead of to a hospital, Joe, is because these people have felony warrants out for their arrest. They don't want to get taken into custody when they come out of whatever situation they're in, and they don't want to get dope sick in a jail cell. And that's not my post to judge them. I'm not a drug user. I mean, I smoked medical marijuana because of PTSD, and the VA signed it off for me years ago. But I take pain meds because I was captured and tortured, and my body is damaged as a result. But nothing illegal, nothing criminal. I have no desire to run around being high in the middle of the day. I'm not interested in any of that anymore, and haven't been for decades. But the point is this: how would I understand that community had I not been a part of that community in younger years of life, providing the drugs that destroyed all of those lives out there? So it's a real humbling payback. But I want to move on in the last 10 minutes we got here about Gunnar.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gunnar is a personal friend to both me and Jeff. He is also a podcast show host. He's an author of some amazing books that he started writing when he was in prison. He did 13 years, and we just found out in the last couple of weeks that our brother, our friend, has a terminal illness going on right now that's going to take him from us pretty soon. And I'm hoping to have him on my show in 2 more days. But right now, I was really touched when I saw you online and you were discussing your feelings about the inevitability of us losing Gunnar. And that's why I asked and requested that you would come on my show today, so we could share with the audience what it feels like to hear news like that about someone that you truly care for. And every family in America, as we were talking earlier, is touched by death. We all lose people we love. We all know that expectation of our ultimate death is coming also. But how do we deal? How do we share these type of emotions and feelings with one another about someone that we care about, that we know we're not going to have in our life pretty soon? Can I get your slant on that?
Yeah, absolutely. When you're involved with the stuff you can't see the forest for the trees. You don't really grasp exactly what the consequences are in the real world to others at times, or how it's going to come back on you. When I really got my head straight around 2012-ish or so, I found out that even though I survived Operation Greenspeaker and some other stuff, that the DA and them, they had never forgot about me. And the moment they got their opportunity on something smaller, they boost it up, because that's their chance they see to pay you back for what you did that they never could get you for. And so that got me into the whole recovery community as a whole. And I started seeing, you hear these stories at AA and NA meetings of people who didn't make it. And then you start to see some other stuff like, I already had friends who'd gone to prison, federal and state. One of my co-defendants in a case in 94 became he's a white dude that was in California, got shipped out in the 3 strikes era. He's barely back home now, same age as me. He's on the house. He's on, he's on at a halfway house. He was a strong, he went in there as a white soldier into the California system, and him and the Southsiders in the woods, and they did what they had to do behind bars, their whole war they have. And you see it in, like, one of my guys that used to transport for me literally died in my vehicle in 2015. He called me up from a bar. He was older than me, drunk as can be, getting ready to drive. So being a recovery guy in 2015, I'm like, no, Dave, I'm going to go pick you up. And, I picked him up, and then, he wouldn't get out of the vehicle, said he's just going to relax for a minute. So I go in the house. I came back out. The guy was passed away in my front seat. So literally one of my right-hand guys died on just like that. The police, I let the police have my cell phone and cars. They came back very quickly, said, oh yeah, his, years of abuse, drinking from the time he was a kid and other stuff caught up with him. But I saw it firsthand. My own sister, unfortunately, overdosed on she had been off of opiates. She had some stomach surgeries that went wrong, so she had been on pain meds, and she had to score from the street. She had gone clean, and then when she relapsed one time, bro, my mother found her. So at the time I thought, geez, is the Lord paying me back literally right now to illustrate to me that is this an ultimate test of my own future and sobriety, etc. Because you see it. Well, Gunnar and guys like that, unfortunately, in his situation, if I had to take a wild guess, I would say that the conditions of prisons, especially state prisons like Michigan, that God only knows the kind of chemicals you get exposed to in those places. The food is very much substandard. I remember just from county jail, our Kool-Aid packet literally said not for human consumption.
Yeah.
And they were mixing.
I remember those.
Yeah, it says not for human consumption. And I'm like, hey, guard, what are we, cattle right now? Or, what's the deal? Then they ultimately, though, that's, folks, if you think you're going to be a victor in that whole game, you're going to end up in your old age, or even way before your real old age, having some real issues. And with Gunnar, he'll be able to pass away saying he was at peace with all this, that he did positive things. And he did his positive things way before a diagnosis like this.
Yeah,
People won't be able to say it's a deathbed conversion. And no, but none of, I don't listen to critics anyways, but if you do, if he was to, he'd be able to say, no, I did this beforehand. I did positive things beforehand. And it's a tragic situation because, it's always a tragedy when good people catch these kinds of situations, but it's especially tragic because what's going to happen is somebody who's trying to do positive things and knows what it's like in these systems and can relate to those who currently are in them won't be around to help after Jesus ultimately calls him back. But Gunnar will be able to be at the right hand of the Lord. He'll be above, and then he could still be an inspiration from that point of view to people, even if he can't talk to them directly anymore.
Yeah, but you know what, Jeff? He's got us to keep his memory alive. And from time to time, I know that both you and I will discuss Gunnar. And it was Gunnar that introduced me to John Mitchell's show, The Connect, down in Los Angeles. Had me flown down there, had me tell my story. I've had 670,000 views of that story. I'm now making a motion picture of my life with two very good movie producers that know what they're doing, so the story can reflect and go even further. But the thing that I admired so much about Gunnar was the absolution of his transition into the faith that he's carrying with him to be with the Lord. And I love Gunnar. And before I say anything else right now, I want to say to you and to your family, I'm very sorry to hear that statement about your sister. I truly mean that, brother.
Thank you. She left two children behind, and then my daughter was like a daughter to her. My daughter, we were at the Paul McCartney concert this weekend. My daughter's 20 now, and she asked me, "Do you think that my aunt is watching me?" Because my sister, my dad was I got right over here. I got a bunch of authentic original Beatle albums and Led Zeppelin and all those groups, right? So I was like, yeah, your grandfather, who's up there, her other grandparents, your aunt, everybody's looking right now. They're happy to see that you're happy.
Yeah. I understand loss that's close like that, brother. I think all of us do. And that's the reason why we wanted to do this today. And I'm so honored to have you sharing Gunnar and our testimonies about Gunnar. Look at how he impacted our lives. I did hard time in Folsom Prison back in the 1980s when that place was a fucking gladiator school. And after that, years later, I ended up in Leavenworth Federal Prison, which was a whole different environment, but still prison nonetheless. And I remember Gunnar and I having reflections about how time in systems transformed us and changed us, because both of us were in hardcore prisons. We were both in areas where your life was really literally at stake every single day. You could walk out to go to chow and get hit only because you're a white guy and somebody took out a black person or a Mexican person the day before. So these things we have to always take as wisdom, experience, and survivorship that we can pass on through the ministry of working with other people that are coming out of those type of critical events in their life, because we have an understanding. In your case, brother, I could totally feel your passion for him right now and today as we were talking about this. And you've been around the mafia, you've been around hardcore things. You understand what violence, you understand what hatred is, you understand all of it. And all of that is now benefiting your idea and design, if you will, of ministry, because you understand when you talk to someone that's in that world, tell me that you don't reflect back on your own world at that time. And
absolutely.
And you use that wisdom to give them guidance and assurance. And brother, we are the example. And look at Gunnar. My God, talk about an example. He really touched me in my life. He really moved me. He really impacted me. and I believe his story completely because I have lived that kind of a dangerous life, just like you. I believe your story completely. I can look at you and see that no matter how entrenched we are in Christ, we still carry the scars of the remembrance of that which we've heard before we converted. Anyway, we're going to get ready to close up here. And as we get ready to close up, I'd like you to be the one to give the final words to my audience today. And I want to right now, Jeff, thank you so very much for coming on and allowing you and I to talk about Gunnar in the respect and capacity we did. And Gunnar, if you hear this episode, and I hope you do, we'll let you know about it. We love you, brother. We thank God for you in our lives. And you did significant work, and you will continue to do significant work through the people that you impacted in your journey here. Jeff, the floor is yours to close us out.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on. And the overall arching lesson here is that young people do not fall into the trap of listening to the media, certain types of music, and other influences, your peers, whoever, to get into this stuff. You don't watch a movie like Blow and think you're going to be, George Jung, and that it's just going to be this glamorous life. There's a lot of pain that you have to just ignore or overlook on your way up the ladder. And even when you think you're up there and, you start to really sit down and analyze, wow, look what I'm up to now and blah, blah, blah. That is an illusion of power, because at any point, the government can strip you of that power. At any point that God can say, look, I'm going to strip you of that power. At any point, the devil in particular could strip you of that power, because he is the source of that power ultimately. And it really, the best bet for young people today is to avoid the whole drug and alcohol scene as much as possible, and to do positive things for others. When you get later on in life, you'll start to really see the rewards for that kind of hard work and that kind of caring and whatnot. And for those of you who have been around this stuff, that, I'm 50 years old. I do all right. I got 95% of my original hair and about 93% of my original hair color. So considering it could have been worse, but keeping it real, if you're in our situation now, you're somebody who needs help, whatever. First step is admit that you need that help. It's hard to do. It is so hard to get around ego. Everything's going okay. It's hard to get around that ego, but ultimately do what you got to do. Humble yourself and extricate yourself from the game. You can either pull out completely or you do it gradually. I kind of gradually left it all behind as I was getting a college degree and moved on with life. But get out of it before it's too late. And then when you are out of it, and for those of you in recovery, in the 12-step programs, they always tell you that once you get this, it's your turn to give back. Give back to others and do what you got to do. Help others in any way you can. If you have the ability to speak to others and communicate, counsel people. If you have money and you've done well in life, give money towards those that are doing the real groundwork and legwork with the populations that are most at risk. Give your life to the Lord. If you're Jewish, give your life to Moses and Yahweh, ultimately the Old Testament, whatever it is that drives you, that can drive you to sobriety and long-term positivity. Give your life to that, and you will see the benefits of it. And with Gunnar, God bless him. And Gunnar, ultimately, we know where we're all going to be in the same spot that he will be in, unfortunately, sooner than later. We're all going to be there. And Gunnar, you're going to be able to look down, upon this earth and know that you did some very positive things in your last days. And there's an old saying that I heard, at an AA meeting, that sometimes it's not how you walk into the room that matters. It's how you exit the room that matters.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff, again, I want to thank you for being on the show. God bless you. God bless you and your family. And may God continue to bless your ministry and your message. And Gunnar, we love you, man. We love you, and we're there for you, brother. Reach out anytime. And our love also to your wife. And just thank you for everything you've done in my life for me. That did help in transition where I'm going with my goals. So hasta luego, y vaya con Dios, and go Victors. Okay, folks. Well, that wraps up another episode today, and I'd like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to catch our show. Now, if you like these shows, I would ask that you would please hit like, share, and subscribe. It's so important to us that we get these messages out, and we understand that these are graphic, almost toxic interviews. But, this is the kind of impact that we feel is needed in order to make sure that people understand the significance of the problems that we are confronted within our own country and around the globe. So I'm going to say at this time that I love you all. God bless you all. Hasta luego, y vaya con Dios, and go Victors.